Are women equal to men in God's eyes? Within Christianity today, there is a wide range of views on the status of women in society. But historically, Christian churches were predominantly patriarchal. That is, women were subordinate to men who held a disproportionately large share of power. Within the social structure of those churches that practice patriarchy today, the subordination of women to men has two aspects. One is in the overall structure of the church, and the other is in the home. Concerning the first, women are prohibited from being ordained clergy, and in some cases denied holding leadership positions. A New Testament passage that is often quoted to justify this practice is in a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians. Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law. And if they will learn anything, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is a shame for women to speak in the church. A New Testament passage that is often quoted to justify the subordination of women to men in the home is in a letter written by Paul to the Ephesians. Wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Therefore, as the church is subject unto Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Since Jesus Christ did not appoint the Apostle Paul to be the authoritative interpreter of his teachings, and since the Apostle Paul was not himself the Word made flesh, there is an ongoing debate as to whether the above passages were divinely inspired, or whether Paul simply brought with him into Christianity the Roman law called paterfamilias. The word paterfamilias comes from the ancient Roman law. The word itself is Latin, combining pater, father, and familias, family. In other words, he was the father of the family, and in Rome, that meant that he had legal rights to everything the family owned and authority over each of its members. Thankfully, when Jesus Christ returned in the glory of the Father, Bahá'u'lláh, he clarified God's view on the equality of women and men. Among the teachings of Bahá'u'lláh is the equality of women and men. The world of humanity has two wings. One is women, and the other men. Not until both wings are equally developed can the bird fly. Should one wing remain weak, flight is impossible. Not until the world of women becomes equal to the world of men in the acquisition of virtues and perfections can success and prosperity be attained as they ought to be. Know thou that the distinction between male and female is an exigency of the physical world, and hath no connection with the Spirit. For the Spirit and the world of the Spirit are sanctified above such exigencies, and wholly beyond the reach of such changes as befall the physical body in the contingent world. In former ages, men enjoyed ascendancy over women because bodily might reigned supreme, and the Spirit was subject to its domination. In this radiant age, however, since the power of the Spirit hath transcended that of the body, and assumed its ascendancy, authority, and dominion over the human world, this physical distinction hath ceased to be of consequence. And as the sway and influence of the Spirit have become apparent, women have come to be the full equals of men. Know thou, O handmaid, that in the sight of Bahá'í, women are accounted the same as men, and God hath created all humankind in his own image and after his own likeness. That is, men and women alike are the revealers of his names and attributes, and from the spiritual viewpoint, there is no difference between them. Whoever draweth nearer to God, that one is most favored, whether man or woman. How many a handmaid, ardent and devoted, hath within the sheltering shade of Baha proved superior to men, and surpassed the famous of the earth. Briefly, history furnishes evidence that during the past centuries there have been great women as well as great men. But in general, owing to a lack of educational advantages, women have been restricted and deprived of opportunity to become fully qualified and representative of humankind. The truth is that God has endowed all humankind with intelligence and perception, and has confirmed all as His servants and children. Therefore, in the plan and estimate of God, there is no distinction between male and female. Women are sometimes superior to men. Among the miracles which distinguish the sacred dispensation is this, that women have evinced a greater boldness than men when enlisted in the ranks of the faith. In this day, there are women among the Baha'is who far outshine men. They are wise, talented, well-informed, progressive, most intelligent, and the light of men. They surpass men in courage. When they speak in meetings, the men listen with great respect. Furthermore, the education of women is of greater importance than the education of men, for they are the mothers of the race, and mothers rear the children. The first teachers of children are the mothers. Therefore, they must be capably trained in order to educate both sons and daughters. There are many provisions in the words of Baha'u'lláh in regard to this. Taken in general, women today have a stronger sense of religion than men. The woman's intuition is more correct. She is more receptive, and her intelligence is quicker. In the cause of Baha'u'lláh, there have been women who were superior to men in illumination, intellect, divine virtues, and devotion to God. Among them was Qurratul Ain, solace of my eyes, also known as Tahireh, the Pure One. When she spoke, she was listened to reverently by the most learned men. They were most respectful in her presence, and none dared to contradict her. The story of Tahireh, the Pure One.
While Baha'u'lláh was being so odiously and cruelly subjected to the trials and tribulations inseparable from those tumultuous days, another luminary of the faith, the valiant Tahireh, was swiftly succumbing to their devastating power. Her meteoric career, inaugurated in Karbala, culminating in Badasht, was now about to attain its final consummation, in a martyrdom that may well rank as one of the most affecting episodes in the most turbulent period of Bahá'í history. Born in the same year as Baha'u'lláh, regarded from childhood by her fellow townsmen as a prodigy alike in her intelligence and beauty, highly esteemed even by some of the most haughty and learned ulamas of her country prior to her conversion for the brilliancy and novelty of the views she propounded. Acclaimed as Qurratul Ain, solace of my eyes, by her admiring teacher, Sayyid Kazem, entitled Tahireh, the Pure One, by the tongue of power and glory, and the only woman enrolled by the Bab as one of the letters of the living. She had, through a dream, established her first contact with a faith which she continued to propagate to her last breath, and in its hour of greatest peril, with all the ardour of her insubduable spirit. Undeterred by the vehement protests of her father, contemptuous of the anathemas of her uncle, unmoved by the earnest solicitations of her husband and her brothers, undaunted by the measures which, first in Karbala and subsequently in Baghdad, and later in Qazvin, the civil and ecclesiastical authorities had taken to curtail her activities. With eager energy, she urged the Bahá'í cause. Through her eloquent pleadings, her fearless denunciations, her dissertations, poems, and translations, her commentaries and correspondence, she persisted in firing the imagination and in enlisting the allegiance of Arabs and Persians alike to the new revelation, in condemning the perversity of her generation, and in advocating a revolutionary transformation in the habits and manners of her people. She it was who, while in Karbala, the foremost stronghold of Shia Islam, had been moved to address lengthy epistles to each of the ulamas residing in that city, who relegated women to a rank little higher than animals and denied them even the possession of a soul, epistles in which she ably vindicated her high purpose and exposed their malignant designs. It was through her prodigious eloquence and the astounding force of her argument that she confounded the representative delegation of Shia, of Sunni, of Christian and Jewish notables of Baghdad, who had endeavored to dissuade her from her avowed purpose of spreading the tidings of the new message. It was this remarkably gifted woman who undertook the translation of the Bab's lengthy commentary on the Surah of Joseph, the Qayyum-ul-Asma, for the benefit of her Persian co-religionists, and exerted her utmost to spread the knowledge and elucidate the contents of that mighty book. It was her fearlessness, her skill, her organizing ability, and her unquenchable enthusiasm which consolidated her newly won victories in no less inimical a centre than Qazvin, which prided itself on the fact that no fewer than 100 of the highest ecclesiastical leaders of Islam dwelt within its gates. It was she who, in the house of Baha'u'lláh in Tehran, in the course of her memorable interview with the celebrated Wahid, suddenly interrupted his learned discourse on the signs of the new manifestation and vehemently urged him, as she held Abdul-Bahá, then a child, on her lap, to arise and demonstrate through deeds of heroism and self-sacrifice the depth and sincerity of his faith. It was to her doors, during the height of her fame and popularity in Tehran, that the flower of feminine society in the capital flocked to hear her brilliant discourses on the matchless tenets of her faith. It was her passionate and unqualified affirmation of the claims and distinguishing features of the new revelation in a series of 7 conferences with the deputies of the Grand Vizier commissioned to interrogate her, which finally precipitated the sentence of her death. It was from her pen that odes had flowed, attesting in unmistakable language not only her faith in the revelation of the Bab, but also her recognition of the exalted and as yet undisclosed mission of Baha'u'lláh. And last but not least, it was owing to her initiative while participating in the Conference of Badasht that the most challenging implications of a revolutionary and as yet but dimly grasped dispensation were laid bare before her fellow disciples, and the new order permanently divorced from the laws and institutions of Islam. Such marvelous achievements were now to be crowned by and attain their final consummation in her martyrdom, in the midst of the storm that was raging throughout the capital. One night, aware that the hour of her death was at hand, she put on the attire of a bride and anointed herself with perfume, and sending for the wife of the Kalontar, she communicated to her the secret of her impending martyrdom, and confided to her her last wishes. Then, closeting herself in her chambers, she awaited, in prayer and meditation, the hour which was to witness her reunion with her beloved. She was pacing the floor of her room, chanting a litany expressive of both grief and triumph, when the farrashes of Aziz Khan Sardar arrived in the dead of night to conduct her to the Ilkhani garden, which lay beyond the city gates and which was to be the site of her martyrdom. When she arrived, the Sardar was in the midst of a drunken debauch with his lieutenants, and was roaring with laughter. He ordered offhand that she be strangled at once and thrown into a pit. With that same silken kerchief which she had intuitively reserved for that purpose, and delivered in her last moments to the son of the Kalontar who accompanied her, the death of this immortal heroine was accomplished. Her body was lowered into a well, which was then filled with earth and stones in the manner she herself had desired. Thus ended the life of this great Babi heroine, the first woman suffrage martyr, who at her death, turning to the one in whose custody she had been placed, had boldly declared, "You can kill me as soon as you like, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women." Her career was as dazzling as it was brief, as tragic as it was eventful. Unlike her fellow disciples, whose exploits remained for the most part unknown and unsung by their contemporaries in foreign lands, the fame of this immortal woman was noised abroad, and travelling with remarkable swiftness as far as the capitals of Western Europe, aroused the enthusiastic admiration and evoked the ardent praise of men and women of diverse nationalities, callings, and cultures. Little wonder that Abdul-Baha should have joined her name to those of Sarah, of Asiye, of the Virgin Mary, and of Fatima, who in the course of successive dispensations have towered by reason of their intrinsic merits and unique position above the rank and file of their sex. In eloquence, Abdul-Baha himself has written, she was the calamity of the age, and in ratiocination, the trouble of the world. He moreover has described her as a brand afire with the love of God, and a lamp aglow with the bounty of God. Indeed, the wondrous story of her life propagated itself as far and as fast as that of the Bab himself, the direct source of her inspiration. The greatest ideal of womanhood has been Tahirih, is the tribute paid her by the mother of one of the presidents of Austria, Mrs. Mariana Heinisch. I shall try to do for the women of Austria what Tahirih gave her life to do for the women of Persia. Many and diverse are her ardent admirers, who throughout the 5 continents are eager to know more about her. Many are those whose conduct has been ennobled by her inspiring example, who have committed to memory her matchless odes or set to music her poems, before whose eyes glows the vision of her indomitable spirit, in whose hearts is enshrined a love and admiration that time can never dim, and in whose souls burns the determination to tread as dauntlessly and with the same fidelity the path she chose for herself, and from which she never swerved from the moment of her conversion to the hour of her death.